Hello and welcome to Biddeford Today. I'm your host Roger Hirschbees, and today I have three special guests. To my left is Diane Sear, who's the president of the Biddeford Cultural Heritage Center in Biddeford. To her left is Mr. Dennis Latalian, who is a board member for the Biddeford Cultural Heritage Center in Biddeford. And to his left is Dennis Latalian, a board member as well as the president of the Biddeford Historical Society. And welcome, people, to the show.
Thank you.
Today we're going to be talking about the Hall of Fame, and we're going to be talking about the Biddeford Cultural Center, and also to the Biddeford Historical Society. My first question is, what is the Biddeford Cultural Heritage Center?
So about a year ago, we started with meetings to see if there was interest in just the city's changing so quickly. We just wanted to make sure that we didn't lose what made the city so special. So a bunch of people met. We met for about a year. We received our nonprofit status in November. We became a 501c3. The decision was made that even though history, culture, and heritage are all intertwined, we were different enough that we should start our own nonprofit. Right now, we pretty much just have a virtual presence, but we're hoping to have an actual center in the future. Mm-hmm. And we're still doing organization. We're starting with the Hall of Fame program. Mm-hmm. And we also have an oral history program that's in the works that will be starting at some point.
We're going to be talking about the Hall of Fame a little bit down the program. Dennis, do you have anything to say? You're a board member. What do you have to say about the Cultural Center?
Well, I think what interested me the most is the fact that a lot of people are losing the history of the city. As people get older and they move into condos and things, they tend to throw away a lot of stuff, and this would hopefully give us an opportunity to have a place to collect all of these things that people are losing in the process of getting older. It really interested me because I know when my parents came here, there's a lot of history that goes back, and if there's a way to preserve that for future generations, because another couple of generations away, we're going to lose a lot of this, a lot of the word of mouth stuff. That's why Diane mentioned about the oral history thing. I think that's one of the best things we can do because it preserves the actual words and thoughts of some of the members of our community.
Because, it's the same thing. I do the French programming on Sunday morning, and a lot of people are upset because they threw away a lot of those albums and records that they had in the French music. Yeah. Dennis, what's your view on the Heritage Cultural Center?
Well, we need the Cultural Center in Biddeford because we need a museum. We need a place for our artifacts. And for, like everybody says, people are throwing a lot of stuff away, but there's a lot of history in Biddeford. Biddeford goes way back to the 1600s. And there is a lot of history in Biddeford that people don't know about, and they should be made aware of it. And you take back in the 1600s, people went to Jamestown, and people visit Jamestown, and then they go to Massachusetts, to Plymouth Town. Well, Biddeford was also part of that heritage back then, so we should have something that people can come to Biddeford and see what Biddeford is about and how Biddeford grew up and the important people that lived in Biddeford and contributed to the history of the United States and New England and all that. We should have an attraction for people to come to and see what we have.
Speaking of Jamestown, I've been there. Yeah. And that's quite something what they've done down there.
Yes.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and people take vacations to there. So it'd be nice for people to take from Canada and other New England states to come to Biddeford and visit what Biddeford has. And if we have a museum or a cultural center, they can stop by and say, gee, that's interesting. And like we had the Pepperell Mills and what we did here, and we have to preserve our history.
I got another question is, what is the mission of the Biddeford Cultural Heritage Center? But I think we went through it, and I think we explained it pretty well. When was the Biddeford Cultural Heritage Center formed?
So as I said, we started about a year ago, and we finally got our nonprofit status in November. So we were official as of November.
November.
Yeah. So we're fairly young, fairly new organization.
Yeah, I think one of the good things about starting this is it encompasses a lot of other groups in the city too, because like with the Historical Society, you know, it brings in a whole different group of people
Yeah,
to the
'cause-
whole program of saving our history. And you know, you don't realize how much history this city has until you start looking. I didn't until I started doing a little
Right.
research.
Yeah.
And you know, we go back to like 1616 or even before that when
16
Samuel
Before-
Champlain
before the Plymouth
sailed.
people.
1607.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like the Biddeford Historical Society, we take care of the meeting house on the Pool Road.
Right.
But we can't store anything in there. And all of our records and archives and all that are stored at MacArthur Library. We have a room back there. But when you go back there into the archives that we have, you can't see it. It's all in safes. So if we have a cultural center, we could take all of those archives out of there and show the people what we have. And I mean, we have history books or record books from the early 1600. You know, we just acquired the records from the Crescent Street Church, and we have, you know, handwritten records of, you know, birth records and all that, and nobody can look at it because it's in a vault at the MacArthur Library. So if we had a cultural center, all that information could be brought there and people could come and look at it. And right now, genealogy is a big thing. And for us to do genealogy as it is, there's only one person that does it, Charles Butler, and he's getting up in age, and it should be brought down to other people to learn how to do it. And we have all of those records, those birth records, marriage records, death records, at MacArthur Library, but nobody can get to it.
And it's the same with the Franco-American
Right.
Society.
Yes.
You know, there are records and things available, but you can't access them.
Yep.
They're not always properly taken care of because
Yeah.
there should be certain temperatures, certain lighting, archival quality materials. So hopefully if we get going and we work all together, we've been working together, you know.
I know when Ray Gaudette was alive.
Yes.
Of course, Ray was president of
Yes.
the Historical
Yep.
Society for a good number of years. And there was records that he had, the City Hall had.
Right.
And
He archived.
when they found them, they had to put some boxes, I believe, in Waterboro or someplace
Yeah.
like that for the time being because there was no place to store it.
Yep.
And eventually, I think they wound it up at the MacArthur Library,
Right.
if I'm
Yeah.
not mistaken.
Yeah.
The meeting, you were just talking about the meeting house. How old is the meeting house?
Meeting house was built in the 1500. Well, no, the early 1600, 1659, and then it's been renovated in 1740. But the meeting house is in really bad shape right now. The foundation needs to be replaced, and we just redid the roof last year. We did the back wall. We do a little bit every year. But we're at a period now that people are more interested in computers than saving history. And the Biddeford Meeting House has to be saved. I mean, the Declaration of Independence was, was read there. And then back in the early 1700, whenever they had, elections and things like that, the elections took place at the Meeting House where people voted for, city council, mayors and things
Right.
like that. But the Meeting House is a very, very valuable building in Biddeford, and it should be preserved.
Because the city has to hold one meeting a year
Yes,
in
they
that
do.
meeting house.
Yeah.
And I've been in there
Yeah.
numerous times, and it does take you into history,
Yes.
into the past.
Yes.
You see the pews, you
Right.
see everything, because it used to be almost like a church too, wasn't it?
It was a
for
church.
while?
It was, when the Meeting House was built, it was built as a religious building and also as a government building, where it was mandatory for people to have a yearly meeting there every year. And the people came, when the Meeting House was built in Biddeford, it was the first one built in York County. Every county had to have a meeting house. And then as the cities got bigger, then they built meeting house in different parts of the county. But the one in Biddeford was the one that took care of all York County. And during the Civil War, they used to have posters that was posted in different towns, and the people that volunteered to fight in the Civil War would, like Parsonsfield, they'd walk to the meeting house, and when there was a group of them that would gather at the meeting house, then they would march down the Guinea Road and go to wherever they needed them. But it was the same thing with the American Revolution. When the American Revolution started, everybody met at the meeting house, and then they went and dispersed them to wherever they needed. But the meeting house is a very, very valuable building.
If you look at the city as a whole, historical buildings, we have quite a few.
Yes.
I mean, still here, taking us back, but like I say, they tore down the Birch Street School, they tore down the, not Crescent Street, Jefferson Street
Right.
Church,
Yeah.
which had a lot of history
Right.
in there.
And just recently, they tore down the street on West Street, which was, very, very prominent. He was a mayor, and very prominent. And then now they're building condos over there.
And the schools, of course, we know Emory School is a lot of history. Now it's a condo.
Right.
St. Andrews, look
Yeah.
at St. Andrews Parish. Now it's turned to condos and things of that nature, But we still have quite a few. The Mills is a good example of our history here in the city of Biddeford and the people that worked in the Mills.
Yeah.
My next question is how many members do you have in the Cultural Center?
We don't have a number of members. We have all supporters, but we have 7 board members that run, and we have a very diverse group. We have a great group of supporters.
It's really open membership type
Yeah.
of thing where people are invited to come to the monthly meetings if they've got some interest in what's going on. There is a finite number of board members with the president, vice president, treasurer, and so on, but it's pretty much open to anybody that just wants to walk in and see what we're doing and maybe become part of it.
Now, where do you have your meetings for the Cultural Center, and how often do you have them?
We've been meeting at the La Kermesse offices just because we don't really have a place right now. And they've been very gracious in allowing us to use their space. We meet about once a month. Now that we have committees going, the committees meet more often. And there have been times when we've been meeting twice a month, especially at the beginning. But now that we have our committees set, the committees are on their own and they're meeting, and then we meet once a month.
So now your status is a nonprofit?
Yes.
Yeah, and how did you go about that?
That was quite a process, and probably the 2 dentists could tell you more about it than I can. It's a long process. There's a lot of paperwork involved, and I don't remember the exact steps, but I actually have a SCORE mentor who helps me.
Right.
And I've done a lot of research. You talk about computers. I did a lot of research on the computer. First, I gauged the interest, and there was a lot of interest in this, a lot of need. And it's not just things that are being thrown away. A lot of things, I found items for sale on eBay. People die, or the kids don't know what it's worth. They throw it away or whatever. But as far as getting the 501c3, it was a lot of work. We had to do our bylaws. We had to do our articles of incorporation. We had a lot of meetings, but we got it done.
A lot of work, isn't
Yeah,
it?
but it's done.
Dennis?
The thing that people don't realize, like Diane and myself, being as president, I'm president of the Historical Society, and she's president. There's a lot of work that people don't see. Like they talk about monthly meetings. Before you get to that monthly meeting, there's a lot of work that takes place before you get to that monthly meeting. And then after the meeting is done, there's a lot of work that takes place after that. And then, like we were talking earlier, I get all kinds of emails and phone calls about, can you look this up? Can you look that up? And it's very time consuming. There's a lot of work goes into it. And the thing that people have to realize that she's a volunteer and I'm a volunteer. We don't get paid by the city or anybody, or it's all volunteer work. And it can be encompassing after a while.
It's time consuming.
Yes,
People
sirree.
don't realize it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dennis, what do you think?
Well, it's the same thing, being involved with different groups, that's what you find is.
Right.
But I think most of us that do this get a lot of satisfaction
Yes.
of being behind the scenes, but seeing the accomplishments that the
Yeah.
groups
Yeah.
end up doing
Right.
because of that work you do behind the scenes.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
And I know that
Yeah,
that's
that's how
what
I
ends up
feel.
happening is,
Yeah.
you know, Diane can't show up to meetings because she's so busy on doing stuff, but the results of her actions are what is happening with the cultural center. So, you know, you don't see that.
No, you know, there's a lot of work. People don't realize
Right.
it. Just like doing research.
Yeah.
You know, I've been doing these programs since '06. You know, I do a lot of research.
Yeah.
You know, to find out what the right questions are and so forth. Sometimes I might miss one or two, but you know, it does happen. You know, my next question is: are you looking for historical items pertaining to Biddeford or whatever organizations?
We, you know, right now I'm into history books and all that. And the way that I find a lot of history books is I go to estate sales. And you'd be amazed that, if you tell the people that you're with it, the Biddeford Historical Society or whatever, they basically give it to you. Because, you know, people, they want to get rid of it and all that. And there's a lot of artifacts out there that people don't want anymore, and they got to be preserved.
Yes. We're not actively looking right now. If somebody wanted to donate something, that's fine, but we don't have a physical space yet. So what we're hoping to do, we have an ad hoc committee that's working with the Historical Society to catalog and so that we can maybe get an inventory of what is available. If people wanted to do research or whatever, there'd be a list. And maybe, you know, that's a way that we can start. I mean, we do have some items, but sorry.
That's the reason why we need the cultural center.
Yeah.
We need a building, we need a place to hold all of this stuff.
Look at Lewiston,
Yeah.
where they turned that church into a
Yeah.
you know, entertainment plus a museum inside the
right.
church there in
And
Lewiston.
that's what Biddeford needs. They need a museum. Saco's got a museum. The Kennebunk's got the Brick Store Museum. And Biddeford should have one.
Well, I think it's a matter of time before it happens. I mean, I believe it's going to happen.
I do too.
And I mean, we've already went and looked at actually St. Andrew's Church. You know, we talked to the folks over there that are renovating that building and actually discussed some space in there. I mean, it may or may not happen, but I think we're already on that track of looking for space. Because what happens is, I think with this Cultural Heritage Center awareness coming through the community, we're going to start hearing from people that have things or know things. So, you know, the Voices program is going to be a big thing because we're going to be able to get that history from people. But, you know, it never fails. Like you mentioned, you go to an estate sale or a yard sale, and you're looking around. When they find out, they go, hey, you know what? I've got something down in the cellar you might be interested in.
That's true.
You know, hey, I've been saving this, but I don't know what to do with it.
They don't want to get rid of it.
Right, so,
And when you show up, they give it to you.
yep.
Yeah, you know, because it's sad. It is sad because we're losing our, not really our, plus our heritage on top of everything else. But you know, from years past, you know, our parents, our grandparents.
All the stories we grew up with,
Oh.
you know,
Oh,
the
absolutely.
traditions.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's why I recreated the French hour, because I took the idea and I said I needed it around here, and I took that and I ran with it.
That's a fun thing.
It is. And it's good for the community because you know, it's French music, but yet I'm getting a lot of response from the program itself because a lot of people don't understand a word of French, but they love the music. And boy, you know, we burnt with that. In Sanford, we're burnt with that. Now I know you people are planning to do the what is the Biddeford Hall of Fame? Let's go into that.
I'll let you two.
Well, it's one of the activities that was discussed early on when we formed the Cultural Heritage Center, and the thought process behind it is to use it to help people recognize the history by going through the people who have created the history in this. In other words, I mean, we've already had a lot of people nominate and discuss going way back 400 years ago with Samuel de Champlain, who mapped out the area initially, and Richard Vines, who settled the first settlement over a winter period. Nobody thought that could be done, but he did it and proved that, you know, this area could be settled. And this was one of the first areas in the whole country where this happened. So, you know, it's that kind of history that we want to make sure we get preserved. And the Hall of Fame is a way to recognize some of those people, bring attention to them. And I find every time you bring attention to something with somebody else, they end up adding a little more history from another perspective. So, you know, when you start bringing all these pieces together, you have a much more complete history of the area that, you know, we all can enjoy.
Speaking of Richard Vines, you know, Biddeford Pool, that's the first reaction I get. 'Cause if you go at his site down there, you know, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
There is monuments throughout the city.
Right.
And there's one, I think,
well,
Bobblehead Lane, there's a monument that sits in there as well, I believe, in there. Am I right?
On Bridge Road, as you get to Fortune's Rocks, on the right-hand side, they have the Richard Vines Monument, and that was put up by the Daughters of the American, Rebecca Emery and the Daughters of the American Revolution. Right. And at that monument, that's where it was the front door to the lodge that he stayed with the Indians. They had built an Indian lodge there, and that was the front door where they stayed. They spent the winter there. So that's you go there and you can visualize him being there and the Indians there and how they took care of him and all that. So it's interesting to have. But as far as the Hall of Fame, you know, in Biddeford, we have the high school's got the Athletic Hall of Fame.
Yes.
And then when students see that, you know, they practice harder and all that to be in the Hall of Fame.
Right.
And then at UNE, we have the Hall of Fame over there also at University of New England. We have a UNE Hall of Fame, and it's in the Forum. And then when the students, you know, we have tours every Saturday, and the first thing that they see is the Hall of Fame up there. So they want their picture up in the Hall of Fame up there, you know, for going to UNE for sports. And it's not only sport, but for, it's an interesting thing to see, you know, people's picture and their accomplishments and things like that. So it makes people a little bit better in society to, you know, compete to be on there. And same thing with Biddeford athletics. You know, like now we have Demule, that was the hockey player, that Stanley, he went to Biddeford. And now we have the
Ryan Dumoulin?
Right, Dumoulin. So, you know, that's an accomplishment for him. And then he comes to Biddeford and makes, you know, the kids work a little bit harder to be in the Hall of Fame. And then at University of New England, we have the two Florent brothers. And they're going to be in the Hall of Fame over there. So it's just an incentive for people to, you know, gee, I want to be over there too.
Do better.
Do better and be on the Hall. And it would be the same thing for Biddeford. And not only that, when you have a Hall of Fame like that, it brings, you know, visitors in to see, you know, let's go visit their Hall of Fame and see who's there and how they, and it's, you know, Biddeford is going to have an attraction for people to come and visit Biddeford. And a Hall of Fame is excellent for that.
Yeah.
Well, one of the other things with that is also that it's not just for some of the big names, it's
Right.
for regular people.
Yeah.
I mean, we've
Celebrate the
already had
people.
nominations for people who were just workers at the mills, but,
Yeah.
you know, left an impression on the
Yeah.
city. So it encompasses all parts of
So
the
we're
community.
looking to, it's, you know, we're looking to celebrate the whole city, the
Yes.
people of the city, the heritage,
Yep.
the culture, you know, the history. So it can be someone who's living or somebody who's already passed.
Now, where are you going to be establishing this, the Hall of Fame? You know, you're going to be. This is the first year. You're going to nominate X amount of people, but where are you going to hang up? Where are you going to put these?
And speaking to Alan Casavan, that's still, you know, City Hall is one place. You know, Alan and I went and visited the one at UNE, and he liked the layout of UNE and, you know, the way they did it. It's still undetermined where it's going to be.
Okay.
But I think once we do find a place, it's going to be a nice place.
Well, there was a couple of things that are going to be done. One is there's like an appreciation plaque presented
Yes.
to the recipient
Right.
or to somebody representing the recipient. Obviously, we can't give a plaque to somebody that died 400 years ago, but if there's somebody in the family, because a lot of the people that were important in our community had descendants, exactly, so that there will be a plaque presented to them. And there will be a perpetual plaque created, and it still hasn't been decided exactly what form that's going to take. That's going to probably happen in August or September, where there'll be a plaque either at City Hall. There's been discussion of Walk of Fame, where we might embed a plaque in the sidewalk somewheres and do that kind of thing. It might be an outdoor place where we can mount a plaque onto every year and add additional plaques as we go through the year. So there's been a lot of talk, but that part of it hasn't been decided yet.
You know, it's the same thing with the Biddeford Historical Society when Ray Gaudette was there, and I think Dennis was there. Museum on the streets.
Yes, right over here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
A museum on the streets. And then we put plaques, you know, throughout the whole city.
Right, and showing what the houses
Right,
were
right.
or the buildings were.
And the people that live there and the history behind. And it's still a very popular thing.
You know, in the summertime, I see quite a few visitors around, and a lot of them look at those plaques.
Yes.
A lot of them,
Yeah.
and they read it, and they observe it.
Yeah.
You know, it's amazing.
I've lived here all my life, and I still read them. Every time I see one,
Oh, so do I.
I have to stop and look at it and read it.
So do I. You know, it's amazing. You know, if you look at the plaque, this thing here is going to be the same, similar to this, and you know, that's going to work out really well. How many individuals will be inducted into the Hall of Fame this year? Are you looking at?
I think the committee hasn't finalized that yet. We discussed doing 5 every year,
It's gonna be
but
more
the
than
first year, it's going to have to be more the first year because there were so many people that really had a historical impact on the city that I think that the committee's going to find when it comes time to
we're
do
getting a
the
lot of
selection,
names
they're
already.
probably going to have to come up with more than that. But I think long term, we're looking at somewhere between 5 and 10 a year to do.
5 and 10 a year.
Yeah, maybe it's probably going to be on the 5 end of it, but depending how many nominations we get.
Look at the high school. We just talked about the Biddeford Hall of Fame at the high school. You know, their average is almost 8 to 10 a year.
Right.
You know,
Yep.
if you look at it carefully, and you know, it's growing every year. It
Yep.
started, and was a big amount the first year.
Right.
And then it started, and you know, it's like it's
Yeah.
filling in. You got anything else to add, Dennis, to this?
But there's a lot of very important people in Biddeford that past and present that should be recognized for their accomplishment. You know, Biddeford is a great city,
It is.
and we should make it even greater. And we
And
should
what's
make
happening in the mills and things of that nature throughout the mills and things of that nature. Not only the mills, but if you look at Main Street, you know,
Yeah.
the work that the city's putting into it.
Yeah.
You know, it's making a good place. What are the qualifications to be inducted into the Hall of Fame?
So it can be a person who's deceased or alive. They should have some connection to the city, right? Either have lived here or done something to improve or help the city in some way. And I don't know if you want to pick up the rest of
Well, I
it.
think basically it's just recognizing somebody who's had a historically significant, made an impression on the city, you know, that has affected us either long-term or short, but left a significant impression on the city is what it really boils down to.
Past and present.
Past and present.
And one of the things is that there's a lot of people that have been in Biddeford and lived in Biddeford for many, many years now, and people hear their name, but they don't know what that person did. So by having a Hall of Fame, they can go and see, look, all of his accomplishment. That's just like, you know, one other good example is George Thatcher. Thatcher Hotel was named after him. How many people know who George Thatcher was? Nobody knows who George
Unless you read about it.
Unless you read about it. But George Thatcher, you know, he was, he came here as an attorney. James Sullivan was the first attorney that lived in Biddeford. And then when he was an attorney, and he was very good, and then he became governor. He was the 7th governor of Massachusetts, and he went and got George Thatcher from, he was up in Massachusetts from Yarmouth, and brought him here. And then George Thatcher was an attorney and took over James Sullivan's role as an attorney. He became a judge. He was on George Washington's, he was a congressman for George Washington for 8 years, but George Washington was president for 8 years in Washington, not Washington, but in New York. Then after that, John Adams became president, and he was with John Adams for another 4 years. So he was our congressman from Maine and Massachusetts, because Maine was part of the District of Massachusetts. So he was our congressman for 8 years. He's the one that appointed George Hooper to be our first postmaster. He was a judge in Biddeford, and then after he was the judge in Biddeford, he was also not a district court judge, but a Supreme Court judge. And then James Monroe came to visit Biddeford in the 1817, and then he talked to George Thatcher, Monroe talked to George Thatcher, and then in 1820, George Thatcher was very instrumental in making Maine a state, and then once Maine was a state, George Thatcher was very instrumental in forming Bowdoin College because we needed a college. So George Thatcher was one of the founding members of Bowdoin College. And then once Maine became a state, George Thatcher was Maine's Supreme Court judge. So
No, there was a president in the 20s that came to visit Biddeford, wasn't it? And it was up around what the Thatcher Hotel was at the
Yes.
time. I don't know if it's not was it Woodrow Wilson or somebody?
Taft?
There was somebody in that era in the early 20s.
that came